Thanks so much for joining us today on Feelin' Good, sponsored by Warren County Community Services. I'm Shelly Abrams, your host, and I am delighted to share this meeting. It was a rather chance meeting at the July 4th activities that Mason, the city of Mason, sponsored in July. I was drawn to the booth that the American Legion was sponsoring, and in celebration of their 100th anniversary, I felt compelled to visit their booth because my grandfather was a member of the American Legion as a veteran of World War I, and my dad was a member of the American Legion as a veteran of World War II. And I was actually a beneficiary of being selected as a member of Buckeye Girls State when I was a junior in high school at Shelby High School. And I have always felt connected to the American Legion Auxiliary, because they were my sponsor to send me to Buckeye Girls State. So as I was visiting the booth and noticing the folks that were near the booth, I happened to bump into our guest today, and our guest is Judy Pearson. And Judy began sharing with me an entirely different story that evolved from me just making a chance visit to the American Legion booth. So today I'm so happy and delighted to introduce to you Judy Pearson, who has lived for 26 years in the city of Mason. And she is bringing to us today a story of, a compelling nature that I think our audience, I think all of you will enjoy hearing about. So welcome to Feelin' Good, and thank you so much for bringing us this story about the Women's Memorial.
I am delighted to be here.
Tell us a little bit about you.
I'm originally from Pennsylvania. My husband Bob and I have been married for 44 years, and we met in the Air Force. Between us, we have 42 and a half years in the military. Our younger daughter was in the Air Force for 11 and a half years, and our older daughter is an executive with Mercy Health up in Springfield.
Very good.
We have one granddaughter, and I am so honored to be an ambassador for the Women in Military Service for America Memorial. There are two of us in the state of Ohio. My counterpart covers more or less the Northeast, and I cover the Southwest. And we bring information about the Women's Memorial basically to anybody who'll listen to us.
Very good. Well, even today when we were getting ready for the show, I was asking for clarification as far as is the Women's Memorial part of the American Legion? And you said, no, it is actually not, although you are a member of the American Legion. So let's define a little bit more just the essence of the organization you're representing and the mission and the effort that we're going to talk of today.
The Women's Memorial is the only national memorial solely dedicated to honoring the service of women who have defended our freedom from the Revolutionary War through today and on into forever. It is truly a living, breathing memorial that I like to say is hiding in plain sight.
I know. I mean, and I'm a student of history, and I have to admit that I know very little.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm here to listen to your story today.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about the history.
Okay.
of the memorial itself, how it came to be our memorial. We'll take a tour on the inside, and then how your viewers, why they're so important to this whole thing.
Very good, very good.
So in the 1930s, they wanted a fitting entrance to Arlington Cemetery. And so they put out a design contest, and a very prestigious architectural firm from New York City was commissioned to design the entrance to Arlington National Cemetery, which they did. But in the 30s, nobody had any money.
Okay.
And so it fell into significant disrepair. So fast forward several years, like 30, when a group of World War II women veterans were touring Washington, D.C. This is how it looked when it fell into disrepair. They were touring Washington, D.C., and they noticed that there was really nothing to honor their service. There was Washington, Lincoln, Jefferson memorials, but nothing for women. And so that started the seed. When the Vietnam Women's Memorial, the Nurse Memorial, was dedicated, these women stood up and said, but wait a minute. There weren't only women in Vietnam, there weren't only nurses. We go way back to the Revolutionary War. And they went to, actually, a congresswoman from Ohio, Mary Rose Okar. And she said, no, you can't be right. And they said, no, we are. So she looked around Washington and said, by golly. And she and Senator Murkowski put together legislation that President Reagan signed in 1985, that something should be built to honor women veterans, with the proviso that no federal funds be used.
Well, that's quite a challenge.
It was. And so a foundation was born, the Women in Military Service for America Memorial Foundation, through private donations and the selling of coins, and they raised $22 million.
Oh my.
And so the only federal funds that were used were to rehab the existing structure.
Okay.
They had a design competition. Over 130 different architectural firms wanted to be a part of the repurposing of the original structure. The one who won, the proviso for this whole competition was that any firm who entered had to have a woman on their board or in a lead role, which I thought was pretty cool.
Very good. Yes, indeed.
The design firm who won, his mom was a nurse, I believe, in World War II, and she said, you will enter this competition and you will win it, because she had a very vested interest.
Right, right, right.
So they built out the existing structure, and that's the way it looked. That's the way it looks today.
Look at that beautiful memorial. So this is located at the entryway of Arlington National
It is the
Cemetery.
ceremonial entrance. There's something really cool. If you look at that picture and you see, it looks like the divider in the street. It's about 2 bricks wide. It goes up through our memorial. It actually begins at the Lincoln Monument. Goes up through our memorial and up to the Lee Mansion. It was designed to symbolically reunite the North and the South.
Ah.
So there are lots of little tidbits in the memorial itself.
Well, you know, interestingly enough, this morning, well, every morning I look at my phone and my Facebook, and this morning, the memory that popped up was my visit to the museum in D.C. last year, this very day. And I can see where I'm going to have to make a return trip very soon, because I had no idea that any of this was at Arlington, and this will just give me a destination to visit for sure.
And that's a good point, and that's why the ambassador program was begun, because there are so many people, let alone women veterans, who don't know this is there and who don't realize that women are veterans too.
Indeed.
Bob and I can be standing side by side, and he'll have his U.S. Air Force KC-135 hat on, and I'll have my U.S. Air Force Woman Veteran Proudly Served hat on, and they'll look at Bob and go, "Thank you for your service." Excuse me.
But they
I'm
don't.
here too.
But they don't look at you thinking that you served.
Right. But so they repurposed the memorial. At the dedication, that's what it looked like.
Look
Women
at that crowd.
veterans were so excited. And so let me take you inside and show you what it looks like.
Let's go.
We have museum quality galleries that start with the Revolutionary War and cover every historical aspect of American conflict. And they either have artifacts from those periods or actual uniforms that were donated by the women themselves or their families. So there's also a theater that seats over 180 people. And then there is a very special area called the Hall of Honor. And I have to take a minute when I talk about this. There is a book in the Hall of Honor that has the names of all of our women who have been killed in combat. And families have donated memorabilia for that. But if you look carefully, there are 3 stones, and they're called the Sister Stones. And these stones were quarried and saved if anything happened to the tomb of the unknown soldier. They are the same stone. When our memorial opened, the stones that were held in reserve in case anything happened to the tomb were donated to us. And so these 3 sister stones stand in tribute over this very special place in the museum.
Very compelling.
It is.
Compelling history.
You know, you just have to really stop and think about that for a moment.
Indeed. Well, and now it's so timely because we're getting ready to celebrate the centennial for suffragists, and so much of women's history is coming out that you never even learned in school, in high school, in college, and this would go right along with kind of the hidden figures sort of idea of where is all that herstory, about the hers.
Oh, that's good. I like that. I have to use that.
And so this just fits, complements with all the stories that I'm starting to hear, books I'm reading about the role that so many women played in history. So your mother was a veteran as well.
My mom was in the Cadet Nurse Corps in World War II and served. She was a nursing student and served with the Native Americans in Tallahassee, Oklahoma. Extremely proud of being a cadet nurse. And so my mom is registered on the memorial. I'm registered on the memorial, and our daughter is registered. So it's a very generational thing.
And you showed me a copy. Well, you also brought your.
I did.
Your.
There are.
I don't know that you can see this, but you've got a nice
brochure,
and inside is the registration or the application for registration?
There are actually 3 ways you can register.
Okay.
You can go to the memorial itself, to the registration area,
Okay.
and fill out the form online at the memorial itself. You can register online at womensmemorial.org, or you can fill out that registration and send it in. And when you do, and what makes this a living, breathing structure is that generations from now, my granddaughter can go to the memorial, type in my name, and my service record will come up. And so any woman who registers, that's what can happen. And it's pretty awesome.
Oh, amazing.
It has your birthplace, your awards and decorations, your favorite memory, a picture, and so it can be what you want it to be. But it's ever changing because it's open to all women. And that's where your viewers come in, is that everybody knows that woman down the street who always talks about when she was in the Army, or your mom, or your granddaughter. We were at a speedway one night getting a cup of coffee up in Springfield, and the young woman behind the counter had a jacket on that had Army on it. Oh, what's your connection? So she was in the Guard, and I said, oh, gave her one of my cards. She said, my mom would cry if I do this. She'll be so proud.
Oh.
So while she was talking, the other clerk was taking a picture of my card. I said, what are you doing? And she said, my girlfriend just went into the Air Force. She'll love this. And so you never know where or when you're going to meet someone who's eligible. And it's all uniformed women from the Revolutionary War, the Cadet Nurse Corps, the Red Cross who served in conflict overseas, Civil Air Patrol, Public Health Service. So there are many, many different ways that you are welcome to be registered on the memorial. And there's a very sad statistic that goes along with how many women are registered. We've had over 3 million women serve our country since the Revolutionary War. To date, we have less than 9% registered on the memorial. From the state of Ohio, the statistics are pretty sad too. So we really do need to get the word out. And having this program is awesome. Thank you.
Well, I mean, we're delighted to share these types of stories because we want people to, learn new things and then follow up and actually put that notion into action in regard to contacting you.
Yes.
What would the contact information to contact you be?
You can contact me either through, let me leave it with you.
Okay.
And maybe Joe can because there are several different phone numbers.
Okay.
There's a website that you can contact me through. I am available to come speak any way that we can get the word out.
Very good.
If you look at the memorial up here, those are glass panels. And at night, they just shine. There are 4 different stairways within the memorial that take you out to a second level where the vistas of Washington, D.C. are amazing. But at night, you can see President Kennedy's flame, plus you can see these glass panels. On these panels are words by women veterans and about women veterans. And so when you go up there, you can read the words of women themselves and what they've said about their service. but just by a fluke, when the sun shines on that, they reflect down into the memorial itself. And so those words are inside of the memorial also. It is just, it's an awesome place.
Well, definitely a place to visit for sure. You mentioned something earlier about you could actually designate what one of your favorite memories was in your official. It looks like a diploma, but
Yeah, it does.
Yes.
It does.
What would that memory be for you?
I was very honored. I served 22 and a half years and was, now you're going to make me cry, was very honored to be in the Air Force. But one thing that really stands out and what I put on here was when I was a baby nurse back at Rickenbacker Air Force Base. Always thought about flight nursing, being a flight nurse. And one night, Christmas Eve, we had an urgent patient, and they dispatched an aircraft to come and take our patient to Wilford Hall Medical Center where he could be treated. And so the snow was softly falling, and my charge nurse knew that this was a dream of mine. So she came in so I could accompany the patient to the airplane. And we got out to the flight line, and there was this magnificent DC-9 aircraft that was designed to only carry patients. And it's blue and white, and it's gorgeous. The flight crew was there, the nurses and the technicians and the pilots, and they looked stunning. And they were wonderful. They were caring and professional. And I thought, this is where I need to be. And that sealed the deal. She sent me to flight school. I flew for 5 years, and I loved it.
So you actually flew as part of your service?
As a nurse in a DC-9, a C-130, and a C-141.
Really?
Yeah. And we would routinely transport patients throughout the U.S. or from overseas back. But they had airplanes on call 24 hours a day, and to save life, limb, or eyesight, those planes would be dispatched for one patient. And this was back in the day. They don't have the same services right now. They would go for one person, dispatch a whole aircraft, a crew, perhaps a physician, nurse, and med techs, and you would move that patient. Absolutely amazing.
So if you were talking to young women today, what would be the career path that might take them from high school to where you ended up?
You could, what I did, I graduated from Case Western Reserve School of Nursing, worked for a year in a civilian hospital, and then went into the Air Force.
Okay.
You could go to the Air Force Academy, ROTC. You could go to your nursing program and then go into the Air Force. Many different roles. And one thing that's nice about the memorial is that there are pictures of nurses, there are pictures of women astronauts, there are pictures of women physicians. And so young school kids who come through realize that there's a whole world out there for them, and they don't have to do traditional things.
Well, today my grandchildren accompanied me, and I was showing them your little basket here, which caught my eye at your display in July when I met you, and you might explain what the little basket is filled with here.
Well, the little basket was made by a very dear friend of mine specifically for my display.
Okay, great.
The soldiers, pink soldiers, women soldiers, but you have to bear in mind that women aren't just men painted pink. And this same company is now designing female Army soldiers. But they base them, these Green Army men have a long history back to like World War II when they first started. And so this gentleman is trying to get them historically correct, but also visually and anatomically correct
Right.
for women.
Right.
And they're working very, very hard. They just put out a survey the other day about the hairstyles. And do you like this hairstyle? Do you like that hairstyle?
Interesting.
It is.
Well, I have to say that I told you my memory of a year ago popped up. And the reason I was in D.C. is I was coming back from a visit to the U.S. Naval Academy. And I'm noticing when they do their grand march on that more and more of the leaders who are leading the different groups, and even the entire group when I saw the grand march on, was a young woman who, well, I mean, words can't explain how I felt to see so many women in leadership positions and young women in leadership positions on that, on that level. And you knew that they were going to be, commissioned just as the young men, which is very, whenever I go to the Naval Academy, it's always a little overwhelming to me because there's so much, just like you said, sort of the legacy of all those who have come before. There's so much pride, honor, and just, I usually, the reason I'm there is Bob Viney, and I go, and he's a graduate of the Naval Academy. And his class was in 1970, so we went back for what was called a ring dance, and a link in the chain was linking them with the class that will be graduating next year. It's a 50-year, kind of thing. And they are so honored, the young people are so honored to see the class of 70 members. Before women were included at the Naval Academy, they are just so honored that they have made the trip back to be with the class that will be graduating and so forth. So anytime I get a chance to go to the Naval Academy, and I'm sure I would have the same feeling. Air Force Academy, West Point, I have visited, and you just get that, that feeling of, service above self, service for the country, and so on. That a lot of pride.
Our daughter graduated from the Air Force Academy. She went back to teach later. And I think what strikes me is that our tax dollars are well spent. When these young people look you in the eye, it's a sincere, and their handshakes are firm.
Yes, indeed.
And yes, I agree with you. So the next time you go to Washington, D.C., you go to the Visitor Center and down the little pathway, and you can turn left to see President Kennedy's grave. Turn right and go to the Women in Military Service for America Memorial.
Very, very good. Well, I would love to have you speak to a couple of different groups that I belong to. Your program would be so appropriate. So for those that hear about this, you would go to civic organizations, you would go to senior living,
yes.
Facilities, you would go to, any group that would like to hear the story.
I've spoken to the Exchange Club of North America. I'm going to speak at the Lebanon Rotary.
Very good.
Coming up. Warren County Veterans Picnic. Tomorrow I'm going up to Dayton and setting up, I have a bigger display than this, setting up my display for the Army Women Veterans Conference that's going on in Dayton. Ohio, 2 weekends ago, had probably one of the largest women's veterans conferences in the country.
Oh my, where was that?
Columbus.
In Columbus,
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so we set up, my counterpart came down, we set up our display. We probably saw over 400 women and men that day. And men are just as interested as women.
Oh, yes.
And the number of women who say, well, I didn't even know this was here. And it's mine, are just so excited to know that something is there to honor them.
Well, this is such a compelling story, and I thank you and your husband and your daughter and your mother
Thank you.
for your service and for sharing, this Women's Memorial with us, and all the history behind it and so on. Are there any upcoming? You did mention a couple upcoming presentations that you're going to be making. Are there any upcoming events that we need to know about, or ways in which we can help support the program? Even if we aren't veterans, are there ways we can support the program?
The memorial, for the first time in its 22-year history, has no debt. It has taken us 22 years. And the general, who was initially the president, put a second mortgage on her house to keep the doors from closing. People are amazingly dedicated to this. So the funds that are raised now are used to do the repairs that should have been done and had to be neglected. The HVAC system, the sinks in the bathrooms, sort of modernizing some of the exhibits, but also digitalizing so that you can take a virtual tour at some point.
Oh, very good.
Of the memorial. And you can make donations directly to the Women's Memorial Foundation in Washington, D.C. Thank you for asking that.
Very good, because I'm sure after listening to your presentation today, several people will wonder how they can get involved and so on and so forth. It is interesting when you bring up the whole idea of women serving, how people, you just hear the most interesting stories come forth and so forth. And I don't know, do you have like a way of sharing those stories? It would be, StoryCorps, NPR does a StoryCorps where people will share those special stories like you just did. And then they record them, and so then that's at the Women's Memorial, so you could maybe pipe into it,
And that is coming. And also the director of the board, the president of the board of directors, and the president of the museum or the memorial will come and speak. And we're in transition right now. We have a new president of the memorial itself, and her background is just absolutely amazing. But I wanted to say too that I think that the military is not for everybody. But if it is for you, there is a camaraderie that you won't find anywhere else. Because no matter where you go, you are home. There are people you can speak with, and you speak the same language, and you have the same goals, and protecting our precious freedom is at the bottom of all of it.
Yes, I do see that. I observe that when I just at the July 4th event, I could see all different ages of people around that area, that booth, and I could see their interest in what you were doing and recognizing the American Legion for their 100th anniversary as well.
The city of Mason has just been so supportive. And they gave us this whole area at Red Rhythm and Boom that the National American Legion sent their display. We had our local displays. The Army had their. It was an unprecedented ability to showcase what the military and what the American Legion is about.
Right, right. And I even shared on their website, 1968 seems like it was just a few years ago, but to others, it's like, oh, well, decades ago. And I can still remember the keynote speaker at the end of that week that spoke and how much he appreciated as a new citizen who had risen up through the ranks, how much he appreciated the freedoms and being able to vote and so on. And I will never forget that, because I think we take it so for granted sometimes. And I'm always trying to remind people not to take any of the freedoms for granted and to make sure that you vote, because that's what it's all about.
Our girls were both born in England. And I've run this by a lot of military people who have children. And when your children are born and raised or move frequently, I think they just have a little bit broader view. And it's too bad that more people can't be in the military to realize that the world doesn't revolve just around you. There's a whole great big world out there that needs your help.
Indeed.
So we're very fortunate to be able to do this.
Well, Judy, thank you so much for taking your time today, and thanks to your husband Bob for running the PowerPoint, because it's very impressive to me and hopefully to our viewers. And I'm expecting that you learned quite a bit today, and that you will check out the website for the Women's Memorial, and that if you know of any women veterans who should register, you make that move to register and make a point of visiting the memorial in Washington, D.C. We hope you're feeling good, and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.